Hello, everybody, and welcome again. I'm Suchitha Champak, and this is the Purple Science Podcast. Today's episode is a very special one because of two reasons. One, that we have already completed 10 weeks together with this 10th episode. Not to mention, I have been having an amazing time making these, and I hope that you all have been having an amazing time listening to these. And I can't wait for many more of these opportunities of bringing unique stories in science to you all. Also special because in today's episode we have a science communicator joining on record. We will be talking to Ms. Suchitha Champak. She is the founder of SciRio, a company that provides mentorships and support to scicommers across organizations, institutes, and NGOs, and also provides an ecosystem to upskill, find resources, opportunities, and the right network all in one place. Let's find out how Suchita made all of these happen, all about the inception of SciRio and the amazing resources that it has to offer. I had a lot of fun in this conversation. I know that you will too. Without any delay, let's tune in to episode number 10. So, Suchita, what was your cool story of falling in love with science? Did it like happen spontaneously, or was it a passion that you always had planned on pursuing?
I like a lot of people say it was because of my biology teacher in school. She was a wonderful teacher, and I enjoyed learning science.
A lot of
And
people
one of
don't say that. This is unique.
really okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would enjoy her biology lessons, not chemistry so much.
Hmm.
But yeah, I mean, her methods were really nice, being very visual, etc. One of the topics that really caught my interest was genetics. That was introduced to me in my 10th grade, and it was again a very visual and creative imaginative experience for me, because imagining a cell in your body and then going deep inside with the nucleus, DNA, how the DNA is bound, and the different Mendelian genetics. I love playing around with all of that. So that's somewhere I started and decided, okay, I want to do something, pursue more in science. And that's where my curiosity and interest in science began.
That is definitely a very nice story because I have heard most of people say that science is like a backup plan for them, or like going into the basic sciences is like a backup. So this is really refreshing. Uh,
Thank you.
but also, Suchita, like tell us about your undergrad a little bit. Were there any challenges that you faced as a science student? And we know that you are helping out a lot of students now pursue their journeys in science. But what were some challenges that inspired you to, help other students out?
Right. My undergrad, I actually joined Bangalore University to do an integrated master's course. It was a 5 year course. And I was very fascinated with the course module, because they had so many topics from anatomy, physiology in plants and animals to bioinformatics, genetics, immunology, right? So they had so many topics that, I could learn and get perspective into. And so that's why I joined. And since this is a university setup and a state university, although there were, scientists who were conducting research, it was not very vibrant. And at that time, as an undergrad, I was not very, keen on. But towards the end of my third year and in my fourth year, I realized that sure, I might be a jack of all trades, but not the king of any, because it's just an introduction and overview, right? That's when I realized that an exposure into the research arena was important. And that's when I started looking into research centers, institutes that can help me get better insight and hands-on experience, right? So, and even now, when I speak to a lot of young minds doing their bachelor's, master's, I'm in so much awe about how much they're doing beyond just their curriculum. And I really wish I had done that before. And of course, I think from what I've heard so far, the pandemic has really motivated a lot of people when they've sat at home to do and try multiple things, and that is being carried along with them. So I think that that is something that I want to foster. And I don't want any other undergrad or master's student having lack of experience once they're out of college. And that's why I really like helping folks.
Well, I'll come to the fun part, my favorite part personally about your SciComm journey. But before that, if you can also tell us about your experience in academic research, like how was it? What sort of experiments did you enjoy, and did you enjoy your lab experience? So how was it journal?
Right. I ventured into academic research only after I joined my master's. So I quit my integrated master's program after 4 years and joined an MSc because I wanted a specialization. And my specialization was in human disease genetics. This was a program offered by Center for Human Genetics where I got my first exposure into academic research because all the scientists, people who taught us there were trained in premier academic institutes and they were doing great research as well. So that was where my journey began actually. And to be honest, the kind of exposure we got there, that was the steepest learning curve I guess I had in academic research when I started out. We were given freedom to experiment, learn, fail, everything. The practical aspects of it were really nice. And also during my master's thesis, I worked on a particular genetic condition that where I had access to a lot of patient samples, and I indeed discovered a novel mutation, which was the most exciting part during my masters. Right, that was one thing. And after that, I did conduct research for a few years at the Indian Institute of Science and back at my institute, Center for Human Genetics, where I was working with human cells, comparing how cancer cells behave similar to embryonic cells, right? So that was something that was very exciting as well for me. And but I mean, there were of course many other reasons why I moved to SciComm, but my academic journey was exciting in the lab.
That's really good to hear. How was IISc as well? I mean, you were there for some time, and I'm sure that you've had some interesting experiences there as well. So, can you tell us about that?
At the Indian Institute of Science, I had an interesting experience, also like a reality check for, I decided if I had to do a PhD or not, because at that point I was applying for a PhD, but I was also working there. So, working in a lab which was, I would say, above average in size. Like I think we were 20 to 25 people, and there were a whole range of people who had different experiences, expertise. So that was a very interesting group of people I worked with. I also collaborated with another lab. So I had perspectives of two different labs, one cancer biology lab and another fundamental genetics lab. So I had a very interesting perspective. So I was given the responsibility to set up a new line of research in the cancer biology lab using flies because that's where I had the expertise. So that was an interesting journey. I learned a lot from the PhD students, postdoc, and also realized that probably PhD is not for me. And that was the tipping point to explore other things beyond research in science.
That's really fascinating, Suchita. I've just started reading a little bit about fly genetics,
Mhm.
and I think that, you know, these very stories when you're sitting with your microscope looking at a fly and for hours maybe, these are some stories that motivate me to pursue SciComm because I want to tell these stories to the world. What were some fascinating stories that led you to your career in science communication?
So, like I said, my experience at the Indian Institute of Science and my research experience in general was when I decided that I needed to do something beyond just lab. Also, I would say the deviation that I took from traditional research to SciComm was mostly based in dependent on the administrative and hierarchical tendencies of academia in India and not the aversion to science itself. So I wanted to do something, be independent, do something in science, and take science beyond the lab's walls. And that's why I started exploring avenues. Also, another interesting incident, I would say, and I share that with a lot of people, which actually made me realize that, I enjoyed communicating science more than doing it, was when I used to talk to my niece once in a while. So she was, I think, in her fifth or sixth grade when we had this conversation, and she would ask me what I would do, and I would explain how I would work with cancer cells and try to find out how these things work. And the awe at the end of the conversation that she would have is, she would say, "Oh, you're trying to cure cancer." I would take, I would take a pause and then laugh and say, well, you can extrapolate and say that, right? So that was when I realized that, explaining what I did is something that I enjoyed. And every time we met, my explanations got better. And one day after I quit research and when I started SciRio, she asked me, "Are you still doing the same thing?" So I said, "No." And I said, I help scientists talk about their science to people, students like you and your parents. And so, but she was a little sad. She's like, "But why would you do that? It was so exciting finding a cure for cancer." And that's when I realized that a lot of people think that science communication is makes a significant impact, and that's where more work needs to be done.
That's very true. What a lot of people also, I mean, they sort of don't know what science communication is as far as my interactions are concerned. So mostly I've encountered people who didn't know what science communication was and if it can be a career choice. So how were you introduced to scicomm? And obviously we would love to know about the inception of SciRio as well. So how did that happen?
To be honest, I did not know I was doing SciComm until sometime after I was doing it, actually, because I was working at the Center for Human Genetics. We have a genetic counseling section, also a research lab dedicated to working on the diagnostics and treatment part of research for genetic conditions. So I had access to interacting with genetic counselors, patient support groups, and even doctors, right? So what I did was I would just carry a camera and recorder around interviewing all of these different stakeholders, right? So I would pick a theme, one particular condition, genetic condition, and then go around interviewing these people and then weave their perspectives together into a series of articles and interview videos, etc., right? So that was a gap I found, because when you read articles, you either see the perspective of a doctor or a perspective of a patient or a perspective of a genetic counselor, but not everything together. So that's what I tried weaving together. And I did that for quite a while. I think I did that for like about 6 months. And then I realized that, okay, I'm enjoying this. Why don't I do this full time? And that's when I came across this workshop called the Women in Science Journalism Workshop that was organized by India Bioscience and the British Council. That's where I got my first exposure into sci-fi. That's when I thought, okay, now this is something that more people are doing, and they're doing much better, and they're doing a lot of different things. And that was my first exposure. And then I started exploring the entire network, started talking to people, participated in journal clubs that spoke about science communication, discuss science communication. And that's how my journey started. And this was literally a few months before the pandemic began. And after the pandemic, like, everything just shut down, and only access we had towards the internet. And so I thought, okay, why don't I find more people who are doing this? And I started talking to people. I realized that there were people who wanted to get into the field, needed a platform where they could put their blogging skills, writing skills, art skills, right? So that's when I opened up SciRio's website, the blog section, to people, to beginners who could write and publish their work on our website. And that's how it started. And of course, as the journey went by, I pivoted a lot, because I realized that, okay, if we're doing this full time and want this to be an independent thing, then it needs to also have a business model that can sustain itself. So yeah, that's how SciRio started.
Very exciting, Suchitha. That is like really exciting. I think I would, also love to know personally. I don't know about other people, but I'm so excited today to talk to you because this is like something personal to my heart. Can you describe your experiences starting SciRio and then, being a founder of SciRio so far? What are the good and bad experiences you had during this time and any challenges that you had to overcome? And I know that there are a lot of challenges in the field. So how do you overcome them?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't realize early on that I was facing and trying to figure two challenges out. One is making an independent space in science communication, which is still an upcoming and growing
Right.
field, and also entrepreneurship, right? I thought, okay, you know what, a lot of people are building businesses and I can do it too. So what, I can learn, right? That's how I started. And until I think, yeah, it will be about 2 years now that I formally incorporated SciRio. But before that, we did a lot of activities. I was interacting with students, trying to understand what their problems are, helped and tried offering training programs, collaborating with other experts, and all of that, right? Of course, each step had its own challenges and glory. I wouldn't say that it was a very easy path. I had to unlearn many things, learn many new things. For example, we as students in academia or in science, you are trained with a mindset that you're going to do everything only out of passion and that is the only thing that matters, right? Of course, that is the primary criteria that you would have, and that's when you would also prosper in science. But also, it was a hard learning that money also matters. I see now that a lot of PhD students are quitting in between because not just, it's not like they have lost their passion. It's because a lot of administrative issues, not getting funds on time, and it's been really difficult to handle their personal lives. So when your personal life is affected, all your passion goes into the drain, right? So it was a very hard learning that both of them have to go hand in hand. Bringing that mindset into the environment of science and scicomm was and still is a challenge. And also, when we were offering training programs, we right from the get go, we started charging the participants a small fee only because we mostly wanted to support the communicators, the experts who were taking the workshops, right? Whereas on the other hand, there were big institutes, academic institutes, not, NGOs in SciComm that were offering programs at no cost, right? So that was a challenge that, we tried to figure out, and eventually we did get through it, and we had a lot of interactions, a lot of engaging workshops during the pandemic. So that was, I thought, okay, a challenge. That was one. But after things started opening up offline, the interest and saturation levels hit the peak for online workshops. And even though people would pay for the workshop, they wouldn't turn up because that's the kind of limit that people had reached. And I said, okay, this is not going to work out, we need to do offline workshops. So at every time there was a different pivot, and always as entrepreneurs you have to adapt and do better, keep the vision that is the bigger goal that you have, and just change your methods, right? So these are some of my big challenges that I had. And another thing, if I'd like to share, is because SciRio is bootstrapped so far and tried to get some funds. I mean, spoke to a lot of angel investors, spoke to other people who might be interested in funding, etc. But again, the lack of awareness and interest, or rather understanding that SciComm is significantly important for the progress of society, that there was a lack of that awareness in people. And so people didn't think this was an investable business, right? So these are some challenges I am facing currently.
A lot of important points that you bring up here, Suchita. One is definitely, even I don't completely believe in the concept of passion because I feel that sometimes we just need to do what needs to be done. Second thing that you said about entrepreneurship, it's very true that, science, scicomm professionals, especially when it comes to taking up, like choosing between a job or their own thing, money is like never a question, because you know that you're not going to get money anyway. And generating revenue is a big challenge. So let's say, because you said that you talk to a lot of angel investors, and there's a term in business called customer desirability, and I feel that in today's world, I don't see that people even know about psychom for them to desire it. So how do you create that awareness and tell people that they really need this?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, this is the exact challenge I'm trying to address right now. So I think the easiest way to penetrate through this entire space is to start with people who have the awareness, who at least know what SciComm is and why it's important, right? That's where we have started, because this is a long journey that we are going to take. So I realized this challenge, halfway through when I started with SciRio. And to begin with, the easiest way to get through this challenge was to talk to people and initiate conversations communicating science and its significance with people who were aware of this field and why it was important, right? So that's where I'm at, and this is a long road that will be taken, that should be taken to reach to people who don't even know what this is and why this is important. So I still haven't reached there, and it is going to be filled with a lot of challenges.
Well, it's a great note to end on. But also, can you like describe your process of ideating all the science-based activities that you do? And all, because while catering to a diverse audience, you have a variety of initiatives that SciRio takes up. So how do you ideate those activities? And also, if you can tell us about the transition from an online to offline setup, what differences did you notice, and what sort of feedback you got during this time?
Right. So all the programs that we have offered so far have been addressed to science communicators themselves. A lot of times people have this misconception that SciRio does science communication, but SciRio is a platform where we offer support, mentorship, and opportunities for science communicators. So this is like the backstage for science communication, right? Through that, while collaborating with our science communicators who are associated with us, and any projects that we take up, we do communicate science, right? So that's the kind of model that we have, because that is the biggest gap, that there is no ecosystem for science communicators themselves, and that is the gap we are filling here. When I'm thinking about what kind of activities needs to be done to our audience, I go back to conversations that I've had with a lot of people. So during the pandemic, like I said, all I did was talk to a lot of people, understand what were the challenges they were facing, and try to offer solutions, right? So whenever I talk to someone, I find an opportunity there. I find an idea there that can be executed. And every time the frequency of that problem comes up, then I realize that, okay, not just one person, a lot of people need this. And that's when I try to what kind of a solution that can be offered, right? And also, I'm a big fan of exploring other fields beyond science and seeing how they solve problems in this field, right? For example, when we started workshops, there were hardly any other workshops that were happening in SciComm, and they were specific to a particular format of SciComm, mostly science writing. And that's when we started our flagship program, SciComm Lite, where we encompassed different formats and also basic fundamental principles of SciComm into a 7-day program where we gave master's students, PhD students, an overview of what SciComm actually is, right? So talking to people, talking to our audience is what helps me find problems, and when I identify a problem that is there for a lot of people, that's when I try finding the solution to it. So yeah, that's how I go about finding, activities, creating activities for our audience.
You've also recently started two very interesting initiatives, and that's how I found out about you. One is the mini courses that we receive over newsletters, and I know that have been appreciated a lot. I personally enjoy reading them, and there is no resource like this, at least that I know of, that is available and for such low costs. And the other one is the call support. You've been talking to a lot of people and helping them out in starting their journeys in scicomm. So what are some interesting stories that you have there? Like what sort of feedback you got, and what kind of new interesting people did you meet there?
Right. So I'll address the one-on-one calls first before we go to the mini courses. So the one-on-one calls are a formalized way of talking to people, keeping the conversation going, understanding what problems are there, and if there are a set of solutions that are already available and I have access to, how I can share that to these people so they don't have to reinvent the wheel, right? So this is what I had been doing all this while, but now I said, okay, let me formalize it, because people would DM me and then, we would take the conversation forward, have a call, right? So I cut down the initial challenge of, someone reaching out to me and then they find out that I'm open to having a conversation, right? So I put it out to the world saying that I'm happy to help in whatever way possible. And that's how the one-on-one consulting started off. Yeah, that's about that. And of course, again, this initiative is to understand what are the current challenges people are facing and how we can solve them, right? So I would say that, these calls are like a space where I have open ears for, my initiatives that I will want to do in the future, right? So that's about that. With the mini courses, thank you for, saying that and giving me the feedback that you are enjoying these courses. And yes, of course, I have heard from other people too that these are very engaging and, filled with resources. So to give you a little bit of an introduction to what these mini courses are, so these mini courses are 6-day emails where you get one email every day of a particular topic. So let's say this week we are talking about how to use comics to communicate science. So every day you get a little bit of information about this theme, and towards the end of 6 days you will fully be equipped with a lot of resources and also the basic information to get started with if you want to explore that space, right? And also we have other mini courses that talk about improving your current skills. It could be writing, art, understanding your audience, how to, overcome jargon while communicating science, etc., right? So it varies a lot. Now again, this mini course is an example of how I bring in solutions from different fields into science, because such mini courses, newsletters, informative newsletters are very common in the marketing and sales fields, in where people talk about AI, where people talk about no code. So these are people who use email as and newsletters as a tool to share information and build a community, right? So that's where the idea came from, and that's how we started making these mini courses. We just started with the idea that we talk about one concept every week, and we've been doing it so far. I think it's been about 7 months, and we've done this every week. We have a free version of it too, where you can just subscribe it for free, and then you can get a summary of the course with a little bit of insight every Monday. And if you think that it's really helpful, then people subscribe, and the number of subscriptions are increasing day by day. So we're really happy about that. Yeah, that's about the mini courses. And like I said, we've had really good feedback, and so that is in fact our primary motivation to keep going and making the newsletter better every week.
Awesome. I will definitely link these in the description so that everybody can actually go find out for themselves how well curated and amazing these courses are. It's really interesting. I think that will be really helpful, you talking to all the students so they know more about this. Really wonderful work that you're doing. Also, Suchita, this is one question that I personally always have, and I ask many people. How do you measure the impact of your work as a science communicator? Are there like any metrics or methods that you use to evaluate the success of your efforts?
Since there have been a lot of pivot and experiments that I have done through SciRio, every time the scale changes. So when we were doing, for example, when we were doing the workshops, we had a detailed feedback mechanism that we would have with the participants and also the experts or the mentors who I worked with, right? So I would ask them a lot of questions, in a form, and that's where I would understand how impactful the program was for the students and the mentors themselves, because when someone is teaching you something, they also learn a lot, right? And also by understanding their experience, through that I would always iterate and make it better for the next time, right? So that was one thing that we did. Another thing that we do is we collect, actively seek feedback from people who I work with. It could be in terms of projects that we work with, collaborations, or any mentorship that someone has sought, right? So collect, actively seeking feedback, asking the right questions is a way which I mostly take to measure impact. Of course, when people write to me, DM me, and say that I found out about your work and about you from somewhere, and how interested they are in knowing more, that is also a measure of impact. So mostly the measures have been qualitative so far, because we have been pivoting and doing small different experiments. So yeah, the measurement of impact has been qualitative. Of course, in projects that we have done with academic institutes and an NGO and things like that, their feedback is important. The client's feedback is important, and that's where we understand how we can do it better, right? So yeah.
Really interesting. Also, what do you think about the scenario since we've been talking about it? What do you think about the current scenario of SciComm in India? How do you see this field evolving in the coming years with, I mean, it's always a great thing when we sort of try to measure the impact, but we can't see, like, look into the future. But is there any way that we can, if you can give a overview of the scenario of SciComm in India?
Well, the good thing about the SciComm scenario in India is it has been improving constantly at a steady pace, at a good pace in the past 3 years. But I think it needs to become better and faster. I think the way to go is that at an institutional level, at a systematic level, if people start to adopt this method of communication, the impact will be manifold. Right now, a lot of these tier one premier academic institutes have their own communication cell, which is good at the outset, but these communication cells mostly comprise of one or two people who have to do all the work, which is a lot, to be honest. So this, like I said, this is a good step to and a good beginning, but we still have a lot of work to be done. When academic institutes and universities start adopting and internalizing science communication, like I would like to say, I think the impact will become manifold. And because as individuals, as a small organization, as other SciComm experts are doing, like always, doing their best, the impact will be very small if at a systemic level there is no change that is brought, right? So that is the way I see this going. And I hope, I mean, things are hopeful for SciComm in India, because in 2020 we had the draft of the science and STI policy, where science communication was also included as a separate chapter. Of course, sadly, that's still a draft, but I also was part of making that draft, giving inputs. But so the draft happened, which was good. But since it was done, the draft was proposed in 2020. It's 2023 already, and there's nothing significant that has happened there, right? So keeping that momentum going, bringing the systematic change is something that will transform the field of SciComm and adoption of SciComm in India.
Also, if an institute wants to incorporate a communication system, where should they begin, and what are some things that they should keep in mind while they do that?
Well, they can start small. They don't have to, when they begin with, they don't have to set up a separate budget, have a team that is recruited, etc. Right? So, they can start small. They can start working with freelancers. They can start working with groups like ours, where we can help them talk about their science, talk about the research that they're doing, because India is doing a lot of good research and people need to know about it. That's where people can start. And this model really works well for tier two, tier three academic institutes, even state and central universities that need to showcase their impact, right? That's how everyone can start. And if there are bigger institutes that can afford to have a communications team, they can certainly start talking to experts and consultants in the field, understand how other institutions have been doing so far, and they can get started. Usually what happens is these institutes can set aside a particular part of their annual budget for communicating science, and from there they can develop on the different kinds of activities, different things that they can do online and offline to showcase their research to people beyond their institute.
Right. So this is something I asked to all the guests on my podcast, and I think you briefly mentioned this in the beginning, but I would love to know that with the experience that you now have, if you were to relive your undergrad days, what would you do differently?
It would be but obvious that I would have started my SciComm journey sooner. Also, of course, I never interned in my summers between my semesters during my undergrad. So I would have probably used that time better, either doing research or exploring SciComm, right? That would be a couple of things that I would have done differently. Of course, I'm sure that I would have tried so many different things beyond just science, maybe train myself in marketing or even understanding how a business works, and any other skill honestly beyond science and academia. I would have loved to learn and experience that during my undergrad.
Very useful. Just to, before we end the conversation, what are some upcoming interesting events that SciRio is bringing?
So very recently we launched the one-on-one consulting, right? So that is one of the things that is going to stay. We of course have our mini courses that people can subscribe to. We are trying to see how we can collaborate with universities and colleges that are interested to talk about science communication to their students, and even their scientists or faculty, right? So I am engaging with such institutes to have introductory workshops in SciComm for students, sensitize the scientists and faculty of their institutes to understand how they can do SciComm hand in hand with their research. I mean, it could be as simple as making their lab websites more effective, right? So these are some things that are coming along, and I'm looking forward to and looking for institutes and even colleges. It could be undergrad, bachelors, master students who would be interested to do SciComm. I would be happy to work with them to conduct these workshops, take science communication and science communication workshops beyond tier one premier institutes to other institutes as well.
Well, and we will be happy to see all these interesting initiatives that SciRio is planning. And I'm sure that because I have been a part of some of these, I'm sure that the upcoming ones will also be amazing. So thank you for sparing time with us, Suchitha.
Thank you, Shrishti.
And that was it for today's episode with Suchitha Champak. If you want to know more about SciRio, if you want to subscribe to their mini courses or avail any other resources that they have to offer, go check out the description below. And if you have any questions for us or for Suchitha, you can hit us on our social media platforms. I will see you next Tuesday with another episode and another adventure in science. Thanks for tuning in to the Purple Science Podcast. We share stories every Tuesday. Our inbox is always open for your feedback, and our DMs across all social media platforms linked in the description are open to your unique stories. If you know somebody who might benefit from this, do share the podcast with them and spread the joy of learning.